A poor student donated his textbooks to a library, never knowing one held the winning lottery ticket. That simple act of generosity would change more lives than Ethan Carter could have ever imagined as he trudged through the snow that December evening, his worn backpack lighter without the weight of his semester's textbooks, but his heart heavier than the thickening clouds above. The campus library's lights glowed like distant stars against the darkening sky. Inside, warmth wrapped around Ethan's frozen fingers as he placed his carefully maintained economics and literature textbooks on the donation counter. Each book represented a meal skipped, an extra shift worked, a small sacrifice in the larger war against poverty that had defined his existence since childhood. "These look barely used," remarked the librarian, a woman with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses that magnified her kind eyes. Her name tag read, "Margaret." "I'm careful with them," Ethan replied, his voice catching slightly as his fingers lingered on the spine of his favorite, "Advanced Economic Theory. Someone else should get some use out of them now." What he didn't say was that he couldn't afford next semester's tuition. What he didn't explain was that after 3 years of clawing his way through college on scholarships, grants, and grinding night shifts at the campus cafe, he had reached the end of his financial rope. The textbooks were his parting gift to the institution that had almost, but not quite, given him a way out of generational poverty. Margaret's eyes softened with understanding that transcended words. "We appreciate this, Mr. Carter. Many students will benefit." Ethan nodded, fighting the pressure building behind his eyes. The slip of paper he'd tucked into the economics textbook as a bookmark, a $5 lottery ticket he'd bought on a whim during finals week, was long forgotten, dismissed as yet another lost dollar in a life where every cent was accounted for. He never checked the numbers, never knew that fate had slipped between those pages, waiting. Outside, the first heavy snowflakes began to fall, mirroring the quiet desperation settling over Ethan's shoulders as he walked away from his dreams. 3 miles across town, in a small apartment that perpetually smelled of curry from the restaurant below, Lucia Mendez balanced her checkbook with the precision of someone who knew exactly how little room for error existed in her life. At 42, the community college librarian had mastered the art of stretching dollars until they screamed, of making do and making believe that someday things would be different. Her 13-year-old daughter Maya sat at their scratched kitchen table, homework spread around her like fallen leaves. "Mom," Maya said without looking up, "Career Day is next Friday. Will you be able to come this time?" Lucia's hand stilled over her budget notebook. Last year, she had missed Career Day to cover an extra shift at the library when a coworker called in sick. The year before, she'd been down with pneumonia she couldn't afford to treat properly. The disappointment in her daughter's eyes had become a familiar wound. "I'll be there," Lucia promised, though she had no idea how she would manage it. Her supervisor had made it clear that with recent budget cuts, any time off would jeopardize her already tenuous position. Maya looked up then, her dark eyes so like her father's before he walked out on them 9 years ago, cautiously hopeful. "Really? Really?" Lucia affirmed, reaching across the table to squeeze her daughter's hand. The girl was growing so fast, her wrists extended from the sleeves of last year's sweater. Another expense to somehow accommodate. When the phone rang, Lucia answered with the weary expectation of another bill collector. Instead, it was her supervisor at the college library. "We've received a donation of textbooks from the university," he said without preamble. "I need someone to catalog them before the start of next term. It's extra hours, paid at your regular rate." Lucia closed her eyes, silently thanking whatever angel had orchestrated this small blessing. "I'll do it," she said, watching Maya highlight a passage in her social studies book, the nub of her pencil worn to almost nothing. "When can I start?" "Tomorrow. The books are already waiting and processing." After hanging up, Lucia modified her budget with slightly steadier hands. The extra hours wouldn't solve everything, but they might mean new school clothes for Maya. Maybe even that scientific calculator her math teacher had been insisting she needed. Little did she know that among those donated books waited something that would unravel the careful calculations of her life entirely. The community college library was quiet on Saturday morning. Lucia worked methodically, processing each donated textbook with the care of someone who understood their value beyond their price tags. Each one represented possibility, the chance for someone like her to climb just a little higher than their circumstances permitted. She had worked her way through half the stack when she picked up the Advanced Economic Theory text. It was heavier than the others, bound in dark blue with only minimal highlighting on its pages. The previous owner had been gentle with it, respectful. Lucia appreciated that. As she flipped through to check for damage, something slipped from between pages 213 and 214. A folded slip of paper that fluttered to the floor like a wounded bird. Lucia bent to retrieve it, her knees protesting the movement. When she unfolded it, she found herself staring at a lottery ticket dated 3 weeks earlier. For a moment, she considered trying to return it to its owner, but the book had come with dozens of others, and there was no name written inside the cover. Just another forgotten bookmark, like the pressed flowers and old receipts she frequently found between pages. Lucia tucked the ticket into her pocket without much thought. She would check the numbers later, though she held no real hope. Luck had never been a familiar companion in her life. That evening, after Maya had gone to bed, Lucia remembered the ticket. She pulled it from her pocket, smoothing the creases with work-worn fingers, and opened her laptop to check the winning numbers from that date. The first number matched, then the second. By the third, her hands were trembling. By the fourth, she had stopped breathing. All 6 numbers aligned in perfect, impossible synchronicity. The room tilted sideways as Lucia stared at the screen, her mind refusing to process what her eyes were seeing. The jackpot had been $43 million. No one had claimed it. The lottery commission had been advertising for weeks, searching for the winner. A strangled sound escaped her throat. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. With shaking hands, she closed the laptop and sat in the dark of her kitchen, the ticket clutched in her fist like a talisman. If this was real, everything would change. Everything. Maya's future. Their struggling existence. The constant, grinding worry that had been her companion for as long as she could remember. But the ticket wasn't hers. It belonged to someone who had owned that textbook. Someone who had perhaps needed the money just as desperately as she did. Someone who had been generous enough to donate their books rather than sell them. Lucia pressed her forehead against the cool surface of the kitchen table and closed her eyes, the ticket burning like fire against her palm. Ethan's new apartment was really just a room, a converted storage space above a laundromat with a hot plate for a kitchen and a bathroom so small he had to sit sideways on the toilet. But at $400 a month, it was all he could afford after dropping out of university. The February air seeped through poorly sealed windows as he hunched over job applications. His fingers stiff with cold he couldn't afford to chase away with proper heating. 6 weeks of searching had yielded nothing but a part-time position, stocking shelves at a convenience store, barely enough to cover rent and ramen. His phone, the cheapest model he could find, buzzed with a text from his mother. "Found any work yet? Dad's back in hospital. Could use help with bills." Ethan's stomach clenched. His father's heart condition had been deteriorating for years, each medical emergency driving his family deeper into debt. It was the main reason he'd fought so hard to stay in school, to break the cycle. Now he couldn't even help with the mounting medical expenses. He texted back a vague reassurance and set the phone down, rubbing his eyes against the burn of exhaustion and failure. 23 years old, and already he felt as if life had hardened around him like quick-setting concrete. The knock at his door was so unexpected that at first Ethan thought he'd imagined it. Nobody visited him here. Nobody even knew where here was except his landlord and the bill collectors who somehow always found him. When he opened the door, he found a woman in her early 40s standing in the dimly lit hallway. She was neatly dressed in a practical coat and sensible boots, her dark hair threaded with silver at the temples, her expression a complicated mixture of determination and uncertainty. "Ethan Carter?" she asked, her voice softer than he'd expected. "Yes." Wariness crept through him. "Good news never came knocking at your door unannounced. My name is Lucia Mendez. I'm a librarian at Westridge Community College." She hesitated, clutching her purse strap with gloved fingers. "May I come in? I need to talk to you about something important." Ethan stepped back, embarrassment washing over him as she entered his bleak little room. There was nowhere for her to sit except his unmade bed or the single folding chair by his makeshift desk. He hurriedly cleared textbooks from the chair and offered it to her. "I apologize for tracking you down like this," she said, remaining standing. "The university library shared your contact information when I explained the situation." "What situation?" Ethan asked, confusion and alarm rising in equal measure. Lucia reached into her purse and withdrew a folded slip of paper, handling it as if it might disintegrate at any moment. "3 months ago, you donated some textbooks to the university library. They were later transferred to our community college. I found this inside your economics textbook." She held out the paper. Ethan took it automatically, unfolding it to find a lottery ticket he vaguely remembered purchasing during a moment of finals week madness. "Okay," he said slowly, not understanding the significance. "It's the winning ticket for the December Powerball," Lucia said, her voice barely above a whisper. $43 million. No one has claimed it yet. The room seemed to contract around Ethan, the air suddenly too thick to breathe. He stared at the ticket, then at Lucia, certain this was some elaborate prank. "That's not possible," he managed finally. "I've verified the numbers multiple times," she replied. "I even took it to a lawyer to confirm its validity before looking for you." "It's real, Mr. Carter. It's yours." Ethan sank onto the edge of his bed, legs no longer willing to support him. His mind raced through the implications, the possibilities spinning out before him like golden threads. School, his father's medical bills, a real apartment, security, freedom. But a question nagged at him, breaking through the shock. "Why?" he asked, looking up at her. "Why did you look for me? You could have just claimed it yourself. No one would have known." Lucia's expression softened, something like pain flickering across her features. "Because it wasn't mine to take," she said simply. "Because I couldn't live with myself if I built a better life on someone else's fortune." The simple honesty in her voice struck Ethan like a physical blow. In a world that had shown him little kindness, here was an act of integrity so profound it left him speechless. "I have a daughter," Lucia continued quietly. "What kind of example would I be setting if I taught her that it's okay to take something that doesn't belong to you, just because you need it?" Ethan looked down at the ticket again, this small paper fragment that held the power to transform his existence. Then he looked back at Lucia, really seeing her for the first time, the careful mending on her coat sleeve, the worn edges of her boots, the faint worry lines etched around her eyes. She wasn't wealthy. This decision had cost her something too. "Thank you," he said finally, the words wholly inadequate for what she had done. "I don't know what else to say." Lucia nodded, turning to leave. "You don't need to say anything. Just..." She paused at the door, her hand on the knob. "Just do something good with it, okay?" After she left, Ethan sat motionless, the ticket clutched in his hand, feeling as if he had been swept up by a current carrying him toward an unknown shore. 3 days later, Lucia was shelving books in the reference section when a familiar figure approached. Ethan looked different already, straighter somehow, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "I've been thinking," he said without preamble. Lucia slid the last book into place. "About your winnings?" "About you," he corrected. "About why you did what you did." Something in his tone made her pause. "I told you why. You could have kept it. Nobody would have known." "I would have known," she replied quietly. "And more importantly, Maya would have known. There are some lessons worth more than money." Ethan studied her face, his expression unreadable. "I claimed the ticket yesterday. After taxes, it's about 24 million. Lucia nodded, happiness for him mixing with a private ache she refused to acknowledge. "Congratulations. Your life will be very different now." "I want yours to be different too," he said, reaching into his pocket to withdraw an envelope. "This is for you." Lucia stared at the envelope but didn't take it. "I didn't return the ticket for a reward." "It's not a reward. It's..." He hesitated, searching for words. "It's the right thing to do. Please, just open it." With reluctant fingers, Lucia accepted the envelope and carefully unsealed it. Inside was a cashier's check for $3 million. Her vision blurred. "I can't accept this." "You can and you will," Ethan said firmly. "I've thought about it carefully. Without you, I'd never have known about the ticket. We both know I had given up on it. This isn't charity, it's your rightful share." "But, Tani..." "Please," he interrupted, his voice softening. "You talked about setting an example for your daughter. Well, I'm trying to set an example too, for myself, about the kind of person I want to be." Lucia looked down at the check, her mind racing through all it would mean. Maya's education secured. No more worry about rent increases or medical emergencies. The constant, gnawing anxiety that had been her companion for decades, finally silenced. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. Ethan smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face. "You already did, by being honest when most people wouldn't have been. Besides," he added with a slight shrug, "I still have more money than I know what to do with." As if struck by a sudden thought, he glanced at his watch. "I have to go, meeting with financial advisors. But I was wondering, maybe we could have coffee sometime. I think I could learn a lot from someone like you." The unexpected invitation surprised her. "I'd like that," Lucia found herself saying. After he left, she sat at her desk, the check tucked safely away, feeling as if she'd been caught in the eye of a hurricane. everything around her changing while she remained momentarily still at the center. Spring unfurled across the city, painting bare branches with tender green and coaxing flowers from reluctant soil. Ethan stood in the hospital corridor, watching his father sleep peacefully for the first time in years. The best cardiologist in the country had performed the surgery his father had needed for so long, but could never afford. The procedure had been a success. The mountain of medical debt that had crushed his family for decades had been paid in full. His mother, sleeping in the chair beside the bed, had finally lost the perpetual crease of worry between her eyebrows. "Mr. Carter?" A nurse appeared at his elbow. "There's someone asking for you at the front desk." Puzzled, Ethan made his way through the gleaming corridors of the private hospital. Lucia waited in the reception area, a small potted plant in her hands. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said, "but you mentioned your father's surgery was today. I thought maybe—" She held out the plant awkwardly. "It's supposed to purify the air for the recovery room." The simple gesture touched something deep in Ethan's chest. Over the past months, their occasional coffee meetings had evolved into regular conversations. First about the practicalities of sudden wealth, then about books, ideas, hopes, and gradually their lives. Lucia had become something unexpected. A friend, a mentor, perhaps something he wasn't yet ready to define. "That's really thoughtful," he said, accepting the plant. "He's doing well. The doctors say he'll make a full recovery." Relief softened her features. "I'm so glad. Would you like to come up? Meet my parents?" Lucia hesitated. "I wouldn't want to intrude on a family moment." "You wouldn't be," Ethan assured her. "Besides, my mom has been curious about you ever since I told her what happened with the ticket." As they rode the elevator to the cardiac floor, Ethan found himself studying Lucia's profile. The past months had changed her too. The perpetual tension she'd carried had eased. She smiled more readily. She'd even started taking classes toward completing her long-deferred master's degree. "What?" she asked, catching his gaze. "Nothing," he replied. "Just thinking about how strange life is sometimes. If I hadn't donated those books, if I hadn't been assigned to catalog them, if I hadn't bought that ridiculous ticket in the first place." They shared a smile of mutual understanding, two people aware of the fragile thread of coincidence that had connected their lives. In his father's room, Ethan made the introductions. His mother embraced Lucia with tears in her eyes, whispering thank yous that made Lucia blush and protest that she'd only done what any decent person would do. "Not everyone is decent," Ethan's father said from his bed, his voice weak but his eyes clear. "Not everyone would return a fortune to a stranger." "It wasn't my fortune to keep," Lucia replied simply. Later, as they walked through the hospital garden, Ethan found himself telling Lucia about his plans. Returning to university to finish his degree, establishing a scholarship fund for students from backgrounds like his, investing in community development in his old neighborhood. "What about you?" he asked. "Any big plans for your share?" Lucia smiled, watching a butterfly land on a nearby flower. "Maya's college fund is secure. I've paid off our apartment and set aside enough for her to study wherever she wants. The rest," she shrugged, "I'm still figuring it out. But I've been thinking about starting a literacy program at the community center. So many adults in our neighborhood never had the chance to finish their education." Ethan nodded, unsurprised by her desire to help others. "You'd be good at that." "They're coming to." "There's something else," Lucia said, her tone shifting slightly. "Maya's father called last week. He heard about the money somehow." Ethan frowned. What did he want?" "What do you think?" "To reconnect, to be part of our lives again." She shook her head. 9 years of silence, and suddenly he remembers he has a daughter. What did you tell him?" "That Maya and I are doing just fine without him." Her voice was firm, but Ethan detected an undercurrent of old pain. "It's strange. All those years I was struggling, I sometimes thought how different things would be if he'd stayed, if he'd helped. Now that I don't need his help, I realize I never really needed him at all." Impulsively, Ethan reached for her hand. After a moment's surprise, Lucia's fingers curled around his, warm and steady. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I think you and Maya were always going to be fine. Money or no money, you're the strongest person I've ever met." The smile she gave him then was worth more than all the millions in his bank account. 1 year to the day after Lucia had knocked on Ethan's door with a lottery ticket and changed both their lives, they sat together on a bench in the university botanical garden, watching Maya explore the butterfly pavilion ahead of them. "She's going to be taller than both of us," Ethan observed as the teenager bent to examine a particularly vibrant specimen. Takes after her grandfather, Lucia replied. My father was 6 feet tall. The easy companionship between them had deepened over the months. What had begun as cautious friendship had blossomed into something neither had anticipated, a connection that transcended their unusual beginning. I've been meaning to ask you something, Ethan said, suddenly nervous in a way that had nothing to do with their surroundings. Lucia turned to him, eyebrows raised in question. The Scholarship Foundation is hosting a gala next month. I was hoping you might come with me. He hesitated. As my date, the word hung between them, charged with meaning. Until now, they had carefully navigated around defining what they were to each other, aware of the complexities, the age difference, the circumstances of their meeting, the presence of Maya in Lucia's life. A date, Lucia repeated slowly. Unless that's not something you'd want, Ethan added quickly. I just thought, yes, she interrupted, her voice soft but certain. I'd like that. Relief and joy surged through him. Really? She smiled, the afternoon sunlight catching the silver strands in her dark hair. Really? Maya bounded back to them, eyes bright with excitement. Mom! Ethan! There's a morpho butterfly as big as my hand. You have to come see. As they followed Maya deeper into the pavilion, Ethan felt Lucia's hand slip into his, a simple gesture that felt somehow more significant than all the formal financial transactions of the past year. Later, walking Maya home from the gardens, the three of them fell into easy conversation about school, books, and the upcoming summer. To anyone watching, they might have looked like any family enjoying a spring afternoon together, the kind of ordinary happiness that no amount of lottery winnings could purchase. At Lucia's apartment door, Maya hugged Ethan goodbye, something she had begun doing in recent months, before disappearing inside to call a friend. She likes you, Lucia said simply. I like her too, Ethan replied. She's a lot like her mother. Smart, kind, sees right through nonsense. Lucia laughed. She's a teenager. She's full of nonsense. The good kind. They stood for a moment in comfortable silence, neither eager to end the day. I never thanked you properly, Ethan said finally. For what? You're the one who gave me $3 million. For showing me that some things matter more than money. He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. For being honest when it would have been easier not to be. For reminding me that there are still good people in the world. Lucia's expression softened. You would have done the same. I'd like to think so, he said. But because of you, I'll never have to wonder. You showed me who I want to be. When he leaned forward to kiss her, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. As if all the unlikely chances and choices that had brought them together had been leading to this moment all along. 5 years later, a new wing of the university library opened its doors. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating modern study spaces, technology centers, and reading nooks designed to make knowledge accessible to students from all backgrounds. Ethan stood at the back of the gathered crowd, watching as Lucia cut the ceremonial ribbon. Beside her, Maya, now 18 and about to start her own university journey, beamed with pride. At 3 years old, their son Daniel squirmed in Ethan's arms, more interested in the colorful decorations than in the speeches. The Carter Mendez Library Learning Center is officially open, announced the university president, leading the applause. Later, as the celebration continued around them, Ethan found Lucia standing alone in the rare book section, her fingers trailing over a familiar blue-bound volume on a special display. Advanced Economic Theory. Beneath it, protected in a glass case, lay the original lottery ticket. Now just a faded piece of paper, its true value measured not in millions of dollars, but in the lives it had transformed. Feeling nostalgic? Ethan asked, coming to stand beside his wife. Lucia smiled, leaning into him. Just thinking about how easily this might never have happened. If you hadn't donated your books, if you hadn't found the ticket, if you hadn't forgotten to check the numbers. They had played this game many times over the years, tracing the delicate thread of chance and choice that had woven their lives together. Daniel toddled up, clutching a picture book. Read, Mama, he demanded, raising his arms to Lucia. As she lifted their son, Ethan watched them. This family that had come into his life through an act of generosity he'd never expected to be rewarded. The money had changed their circumstances, yes, but it was the choices they'd made afterward that had truly transformed their lives. The library around them, built to ensure that students like he had been would never have to choose between textbooks and food, stood as testament to the power of those choices. What are you thinking about? Lucia asked, noticing his contemplative expression. Ethan smiled, wrapping an arm around his family. Just that some treasures are hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right person to discover them. Like a textbook donated on a snowy evening. Like a lottery ticket forgotten between its pages. Like the love that had grown from the simple decision to do the right thing, even when no one was watching. And in that moment, surrounded by books and the family they had built together, Ethan knew with absolute certainty that he had won something far more valuable than any jackpot.